I first noticed the little orange and pink flags fluttering on a Tuesday morning. It was early, the kind of quiet dawn you only get out here on the Willow Creek Ranch in the foothills of the Bitterroots. Just me and my old border collie, Jasper, walking the north fence line. They were stuck right in the middle of my best alfalfa field, Section 3, and when I pulled one up, the black Sharpie said, clear as day, Route Delta, Pipeline. Now this property, 50 acres of rolling pasture and timber, has been in my wife's family since '48, and it sits a good half-mile outside the jurisdiction of that fancy-pants new development, the Grand Mesa Estates. That's why we bought it, see? To be out of that noise. No one had called, no one had asked permission to survey, no one had even dared to knock on my door, yet here they were, marking up my land like it was their grocery list. I called the county sheriff, a good man, named Deputy Rick, who just shook his head when he rolled up. Looks like the Grand Mesa HOA approved an infrastructure build, Frank, he said, frowning. They're running a utility line for their new Phase 3 straight through here. Rick's expression said it all. He knew their development's arrogant reputation. I told him, they didn't just step over the line, Deputy, they ran a whole parade through it. Rick advised me to document everything, every flag, every track. So I did. I walked the entire boundary line, GPS coordinates, photos, the whole 9 yards. By Thursday they were done with flags and had graduated to spray paint, bright blue, and red slashes cutting across my ryegrass. I spent that afternoon putting up big laminated no trespassing signs every 100 feet. But of course, on Friday morning, they came. Bulldozers. 2 massive yellow Caterpillars, escorted by a white pickup with the HOA logo plastered on the side, the Grand Mesa Development Committee. The foreman, a wiry guy in sunglasses, stepped out like he owned the place. I drove my old Ford right into their path, stepped out, and squared up. You can't be here, I told him, my voice steady. He barely glanced at me, clipboard held up, like a shield. Sir, we filed the necessary easements with municipal planning. We're authorized to begin trenching. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Not on this land, you didn't. I haven't signed a thing. Show me the recorded access. He called the HOA board president, and after 10 minutes of idling machines and clenching, my fists, he came back. They say it's approved and funded. You interfere, you're liable for delays. That's when the heat started building in my chest. The same feeling I used to get as a firefighter when the floor felt hot, but the smoke hadn't risen yet. The feeling that something was fundamentally, dangerously wrong. They backed off that day, but only to regroup. It was dawn on Monday when they returned. I woke up to a sound that scraped against my soul, metal shrieking against metal, the ripping groan of a blade tearing through earth. Jasper was barking madly. I threw on clothes, charged outside and nearly buckled. A bulldozer was already deep in my field, tearing a wide trench, the sharp blade plowing through the rows I'd been nursing for 4 seasons. It wasn't just dirt they were destroying. It was a whole year's work, my retirement income, shredded and mangled. I floored the truck, this time parking it directly in front of the lead dozer's massive blade. And then she arrived. Candace Willoughby, the HOA president, stepping out of a black SUV wearing a fire engine red blazer and a laminated badge. She walked toward me on her heels, sinking slightly into the freshly churned earth, looking at I, like I was a broken fence post. Mr. Harrison, she tilted her head, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You were informed of the filings. Your resistance doesn't change the legal standing. This is critical infrastructure for our water distribution. I pointed behind her toward the destruction. That is private farmland, and you are going to pay for every foot you destroyed, she merely scoffed. This land is designated as a utility corridor under the Municipal Expansion Code, Section B14. We have the city's support. That's when I pulled out my phone. Funny, I said, because I already spoke to city planning. They didn't even know you'd crossed my property line. You're banking on intimidation, hoping I'm too old to fight back. Her expression flickered, just a hairline fracture in her porcelain composure. She threatened an obstruction complaint, damages for delay. I just looked her dead in the eye. You want to fight, Candace? You've got one, but let me be clear, you dig one more inch and you'll be liable for trespass, civil and criminal. I got Russell Drake, my lawyer, on the case immediately. He was furious when he saw the drone photos. Frank, they're not just trespassing, they're bluffing, and we're going to bury them in paperwork. While he filed the TRO and the cease and desist letters, I went out that night, past the old barn until I reached the lake. Moonlight shimmered across the water. The lake my father and grandfather had hand-dug, lining it with quarry stone, and building that little valve system to control the flow into the lower fields. It fed my irrigation, and now it was supposed to feed their fancy Grand Mesa Estates development. They thought I was some clueless old farmer. They thought this was just a runoff pond. I called Candace the next day, right after they started, laying the first segments of blue pipe. Her tone was clipped, formal, still trying to use that HOA authority voice. Mr. Harrison, you are actively obstructing a service line that benefits 400 homes. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the phone. You built a pipeline to draw water from a lake you don't control, ma'am. That lake was built by my father in 1961. It sits entirely on my land. I own the upstream source, which means you're pumping water you have no legal right to touch. There was a long, cold silence on the line. She tried to mock me. Oh, that little pond? Water rights don't apply the way you think they do. My voice dropped low, dangerous. Then you might want to fire your professionals, Candace, because the dam's intake valve is under my control. And if I decide to shut it off, that municipal pipeline of yours is going to run bone dry. She shrieked a threat about sabotage and criminal charges. You've got 24 hours, Miss Willoughby. Pull back your crews or the water stops. At first light, I walked to the concrete valve chamber, Jasper padding silently beside me. I pulled my old leather-bound file, the one with the 1924 land grant and the 1987 court ruling confirming my father's exclusive water rights. They had picked the wrong patch of dirt. I grabbed the rusted metal wheel, slowly, deliberately, and turned it clockwise until the tension maxed out and the flow was sealed. A faint hiss, then silence. By noon, the contractor was calling, panicked. The whole line's dead. We have no draw from the source. 2 weeks later, the day of the injunction hearing, Russell walked into court holding that 1924 land grant. He laid it before the judge, a worn piece of paper that outweighed all their slick binders. This document, Your Honor, Russell said, calmly, contains an easement immunity clause prohibiting construction within 200 feet of my client's lake perimeter. The judge looked over his glasses. And was consent ever granted? Russell just shook his head. No, Your Honor, not verbally, not in writing, not ever. Candace tried to argue it was an ancient document, but the judge cut her off. The age of a contract does not negate its enforceability. He ruled in my favor, awarding $118,000 in damages, and ordering the HOA to remove the pipe and restore the land within 72 hours, or face daily fines. Candace resigned soon after, and the city opened an investigation into their fraudulent permits. When the trucks finally came back, they didn't bring bulldozers to dig. They brought excavators to remove their crime. I stood at the fence line, arms crossed, watching them cut out every last inch of their illegal pipe. Russell called that night, laughing. They tried to appeal, Frank, denied, it's done. I walked back to the lake, past the stone bench my father built. I grabbed my new bolt cutters, replaced the old rusted chain, and put on 2 heavy-duty padlocks. Then, I turned the wheel counterclockwise. The water flowed again, not to their pipeline, but back into the channels that had fed my land for generations. They tried to erase me with paper, but I answered with iron. They mistook my silence for weakness. They thought rural meant irrelevant, but one man with leverage is all it takes. I didn't want to fight, but when they came, I met them with my back straight, my boots planted, and the history of this land behind me. And I won. Because I had the dam and I shut it down. That story, as crazy as it sounds, is absolutely true, every frustrating, satisfying bit of it. The Grand Mesa HOA learned the hard way that you don't mess with Montana water rights. but it makes you think, doesn't it? How often do people in power get away with trampling over the little guy simply because they assume we won't fight back? I want to know what you think. If you've ever had an HOA, a developer, or even a neighbor try to take advantage of you, what did you do? Did you fight or did you roll over? Drop a comment below and tell me your story about standing your ground. And if this story gave you a little bit of fire, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Because trust me, the legal battles don't stop here.